Okay, Richard, are you ready to rock and roll?
Yeah, let's do this. I'm good.
All right, fantastic. So, thank you so much, everyone. We got an absolutely amazing turnout. I still see the numbers going up. This is our inaugural industry expert webinar series. I'm super stoked to be hosting it. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name's Ari. I'm the Director of Customer Success at Tribe. I'm super excited to be the host of our very first Tribe webinar series and share the virtual stage with our legendary speaker today, Richard Millington. So let's jump right into it. So for our agenda, I'm not going to bore you with too many details. You're not here to hear me talk, but the format today will be a few remarks from me, including an overview of what our webinar series is, today's webinar format, and our giveaway. Richard will then take the floor for the majority of the hour. We're going to do our best to save about 10 minutes or so for some Q&A, and then a very quick wrap up. So what is Tribe's webinar series? I'm so glad you asked, Ari. Well, the goal first is to bring industry experts to community builders. What does that mean? We want to help community builders through collaboration and engagement with industry experts. Most of the content you'll experience in this webinar series is agnostic to any one community platform. The goal is to foster more best practices and share knowledge with a wider group of people. Now, the second is, of course, for those not familiar with Tribe, we want to give you an awesome first impression. What better way than to introduce you to Tribe in such a selfless way? For those who are not familiar with us, Tribe empowers businesses to build unique and distinct custom communities under their brand. And for those of you who are familiar with us, this webinar series hopefully accomplishes its goal of driving more value beyond the tools we provide you with through our platform. Finally, I want to assure you that this is no one-hit wonder webinar. We're already planning our next webinar in our industry expert webinar series. For updates, please join Tribe's Campfire community and follow @Tribe Platform for updates. So just a bit of housekeeping here. First, the webinar is being recorded. So if an important call comes up, if you're pulling an all-nighter right now and you fall asleep, your internet cuts out, we got you covered. We'll be sharing the webinar in our Campfire community and be sending it to all the attendees via email. As you might have noticed, everyone is muted. So while I'd love to hear all the cheering and the kudos, the audio chaos that could ensue might get in the way of Richard sharing some of his golden nuggets with us today. Next is questions. We have Q&A. We have a Q&A session at the end. If you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see the ability to submit questions. I'll be reviewing them during the webinar, and we'll select up to 5 questions for Richard. Please keep your questions about Richard's speaking topics. Finally, we need your feedback. We'll be sending out a post-webinar survey. We want to keep improving and won't be able to do it without your feedback. This is also the first one. So feedback, we're ripe for feedback. So be as constructively ruthless as you need to be. We want to hear from you. Now, enough for me. Let's get into it. So for the hundreds in attendance and the millions who will hopefully watch the recording, it's my pleasure to introduce Richard Millington. So Richard is the founder of FeverBee. FeverBee uses proven social science to develop successful online and offline communities for organizations around the world. Over the past 13 years, Richard has helped to develop over 310 successful communities, including brands such as Apple, Facebook, Google, and dozens more. FeverBee helps organizations use powerful psychology to build valuable communities. These communities are designed to foster greater loyalty, resolve customer problems, generate ideas, drive search traffic, and develop the best possible member experience. Richard's also an author of a number of books: Buzzing Communities, the Indispensable Community, and more recently, Build Your Community. Buzzing Communities has been widely cited as introducing best practices into developing successful online communities. Richard has also trained over 1,250 community professionals through FeverBee's Community Management Academy. What a resume. So Richard is also pretty generous too. So he's giving away the first chapter of his most recent book, Build Your Community. All you have to do is share what you learned in Tribe's Campfire community by replying to our post about the webinar, or share what you learned on Twitter by tagging @Tribe Platform and at Richard Millington. All right, over to you, Richard. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and hopefully you can take over the reins.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here today. Let me quickly share my screen, check that everyone can see my screen, and then we can get going. So, can you see my screen okay?
I can, and we got a yes from Mario and Sheila, so I think you're ready to rock.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I'm going to go through a lot of concepts quite quickly, and hopefully you can go through this webinar a bit later on and really dive deep into some of the topics here. What I think FeverBee has been quite successful in doing over the last 10 years or so is really going into almost any online community and being able to put in place processes that will systematically increase the level of growth, systematically increase the level of participation. And once you understand how the system works, it becomes a lot easier to identify the very specific leverage points and the very specific things that really make a difference. And what we found with a lot of organizations that are building community is that they always want more engagement and more participation, but they're often working on completely the wrong things. And what I'm going to try and do from this session is just share a couple of quick ideas you could implement that shouldn't take too much time or resources, that should have a big impact upon the level of growth and participation that we've seen work in a whole variety of different communities. But before we do that, we have to begin with what really determines the level of engagement in a community. And we can think about this ultimately, you're constrained by a couple of things. One is the potential audience. Then it's the number or the percentage of that audience that is interested visitors of your community. And then it's the churn. And then it's how many of your audience are former members. And everywhere within that system, there are opportunities where you can apply a little bit of leverage and a little bit of very tactical, very specific things to increase the level of engagement and participation. But before we dive into that, we have to understand that there are limiting factors. The number of organizations I've worked with that said, oh, we want more engagement and more engagement, regardless of what the potential audience is, regardless of whether they've already reached out to everyone that's ever likely to join their community, is absolutely nuts. So ultimately, you are constrained by a couple of things. One of them is the number of people interested in your topic or the number of customers. You might be able to have some influence upon that, but usually there's a fixed number somewhere out there. You might not know exactly what it is, but there's a fixed number that's out there. Two, for most communities, not all, it's a number of questions that people have to solve. If people don't have questions, they usually don't have a reason to visit that community. There's some exceptions to that we'll cover a bit later. But if they don't have any questions they want to solve, they don't have a reason to visit that community. And then you're limited by the number of people that are already a member of your community or have already churned. So your engagement is limited by these factors. And then you have your former members who no longer participate because they had a poor experience, they lost interest in that topic, there's a competitor that does it better than what your community does, or they just have no more issues that require a community to solve. So a lot of people, they develop a community based around, say, customer support, and people have a question, and they go to the community, they ask a question, they get a great answer, and then they don't participate again because they don't need to. There's no more issues that they need to solve. So engaging departed members is unlikely. It's not impossible, but it's unlikely, and it's not the best use of your time. And fundamentally, if your percentage of interested or the number of interested visitors you have grows faster than your churn, your community grows. I think we all get that in principle. If your potential audience shrinks, if less people become interested in the topic, then your community will shrink eventually as well. And conversely, if it grows, then this will grow as well. And likewise with churn, if your rate of churn grows, then the number of former members grows as well. All pretty basic stuff here, I think. And the magic and the real art of what you do and what I want to dive into today is what happens here. What happens in this spot? What happens in the area where you find ways to get people more interested in visiting your community and how you reduce the rate of churn? Because what we know is that the more people that are engaged in your community, the more engagement you have, that usually means more word of mouth, it means more search traffic and more interested visitors as well. Conversely, if you can reduce the churn just by a small fraction, you often find that can have a big impact upon the level of engagement. And so there's some very specific areas you can target that are going to drive the biggest results. And these areas that seem to have the biggest impact are all within what we call the community experience. And by that, we mean the technology used, whether that's Tribe or another platform, the benefits of engaging in that community, which we'll cover later in this session, the top member program, how you engage and keep your top experts, the process of how you manage and moderate that community, and then you onboard it. How do you take someone that's completely new to your community and deeply engage them within the community? These are typically the biggest leverage points you have to increase the number of interested visitors or reduce the level of churn. And these are the areas where if you optimize them, you can have a big impact. And what we find is that if you want to convert audiences into interested visitors, this is usually the biggest key to growth. And this usually comes in the form of search traffic. So people will be looking for a relevant term and they'll find your community. If you're not running a public community, then automatically you lose all the search traffic. And then you have to think more about your outreach and promotion, word of mouth, and be careful of the competition. And again, the key to reducing churn is usually related to the relevance, how relevant is the information to the people you're trying to reach, how satisfied are people with the community experience, how convenient do they find that experience, and then how fun or fulfilling do they find that community. Usually the top three is more important than the last one. Again, there's some exceptions here, but both of these are listed by order of priority. The more relevant the community is to someone's day-to-day needs, the more they typically come to that community and visit and engage and so on. So we have a whole model that we can spend a lot of time on, and we're not going to today, but you get the idea. If you want to increase the level of engagement, fundamentally, you have to begin with a model like this, understand what the limitations are, understand you're probably not going to re-engage members that have departed, at least not that easily, and really think about that conversion percentages. How you get someone from a potential audience to visit that community, and then how to ensure members have a good experience so they reduce churn. If you only take one screenshot from this entire presentation, this is the one to take. What this means as well is that a lot of your community success is defined by the environment that you're in. So very often when we think about the success and the things we measure that denote the success of a community, it varies, but sometimes it's simply the level of engagement. I'm not personally a big fan of this, but in some kinds of membership site, this can work extremely well. Sometimes it's support costs that have been deflected. It's a success of members in that community. Are they getting or learning everything they need to learn to be successful in the topic? Innovation, when the community drives innovation for the organization. Advocacy, which is to what extent does the community influence people to advocate on behalf of the organization? And then retention of the customers. Again, for a membership site, this is huge. For other kinds of communities, perhaps not less so. And when we think about these things, we measure it using a traffic light system from red to bad to green to good. Really simple in how we think about this. But all these things are affected by the second layer, which is the management processes that you put in place, or what is better known as the community experience. Like I said, the technology, the acquisition, the onboarding, the management, the member programs, and the benefits you offer. So the results you get are reliant upon the community experience that you create. And then this in turn, and this is the really critical part of this, is informed by the community environment. There are some people that do a fantastic job of a community in a very difficult environment, and it doesn't seem like they are as successful as others, but they might be doing a really great job. And by the environment, we're talking about how much support or pressure that you get. To what extent do you have to push the community upon an audience, and what extent do they naturally come to you? Whether the audience are particularly demanding or challenging in any specific way. Whether there's any kind of unique risk, or if the organization is especially risk averse, or whether you're in a very competitive place or not. And so what we're trying to think about here is that you have a choice at times. You can sit within the current environment you're in, or you can try and change the environment. Because a lot of successful community professionals, honestly, are simply working in very fertile environments. If you're in an environment like this, where the organization might be risk averse, say a publicly traded organization in some form, but there's no major existing threat, you've got the budget to grow, you can use whatever platform you want, your audience is especially unique or demanding, and you've got a lot of existing traffic, it's not that difficult to build a successful community in this environment. But if your environment is more like this, where you have limited resources, no budget for staff, can't use the platform you want, can't get permission to get other staff involved, can't update the platform with critical updates you need, where you don't have any initial audience you can reach out to and you're starting from scratch, where you're in a very risk-averse organization, maybe where every post has to be pre-approved or checked, and when it's a lot of existing competitors, this is a completely different space to build a community in. This is a very toxic environment to build a community in. And in situations like this, you can either accept this and try to build a community within that environment, or you have to change that environment, which means you have to position the community the correct way to avoid the competition, or you have to change the internal narrative to get more support, or you have to build a big audience you can reach out to first, or you have to work internally to deal with any risk issues and win people over. So very often, if you want the community to be more successful, you have to tackle that external environment. But I'm going to tackle a couple of very specific things here and go really deep into them. And hopefully then we can extract some of the key lessons here. So part one, increasing interest. How do we get more of the potential audience that you can potentially reach out to interested in visiting your community? How do you get them there? The first lesson is that increasing search traffic is one of the best ways of growing a community. And it's absolutely wild to me that so many organizations are working on things that have the least amount of impact on growth. They often search is responsible for 90% of traffic to a community. And people come by search and not converting. And instead of working upon that, organizations will spend time launching a podcast or any other array of different activities. But really, there's very specific ways you can improve search traffic. For example, if you're a mature community, that I should say archiving, sorry about that. I think that was an autocorrect, but it could be archiving outdated information. And what I mean by that, if you think about how important search is, when we look at all of the variables we have, that could be predictive of a community success, the one that is most predictive is how many people are searching for the brand in the first place. Around 45% of the variability in the level of engagement can be explained by this. And what we found, if we want to improve search traffic, the best thing we can do is make it easier for search, which means removing poor quality information, removing content which is outdated and doesn't get a lot of traffic and doesn't get a lot of views. But you know that if you've ever thought about doing this, you can't simply do that. If you simply remove outdated content, you'll find that members lose their post counts. The community will lose traffic from all the incoming links you've created. It might create new broken links, and it might just hurt the community experience. And so what we typically do with clients is first we use a tool called Screaming Frog, and this will do an audit of the entire community. And then we'll combine all of the discussions that have taken place, all of the articles that have been created, everything that is in that community that we can reach out to with our own data, and we create a list of discussions to archive. And this means when a community has attracted less than 10 visits in the past, when a discussion has attracted less than 10 visits in the past month, and it's received less than 2 posts in the last year, and it's published more than 2 years ago, or when something in the comments section mentions that it's outdated or old, these are usually the things we flag to archive within that community. So what do we mean by archive? It doesn't mean we delete it. What it means is that we de-index it from internal and external search. So it's still there. If you want to find it, it's still there, but it's very hard to find. It means it doesn't show up in Google search results anymore. And what we've seen for a mature community, this is one of the best ways to increase search traffic. You remove the low quality stuff, and Google seems to reward you by sending you more higher quality traffic as a result. If you want a case study of how we did this, you can use the link below. Lesson 2, improving the outreach and promotion. We often don't do a good job of promoting the best discussions internally or externally. So if you look at Money Saving Expert and other of our former clients, what they do a pretty good job of doing is promoting their best discussions externally and internally. They promote it amongst staff members who in turn promote it in their social media channels, and they promote it on their social media feeds on Twitter and Facebook and other channels. And what they also sometimes do is put some advertising dollars behind this. So then they're promoting it so it reaches an even bigger audience. Now, maybe you don't want to do that, but it could be worth exploring. It's one of the very powerful ways to grow the community. Another source of growth in smaller online communities is to engage people to create very specific, very niche kind of discussions about a topic that's taking place in the community. A while ago, we were talking about we were working with, we still are working with US Pharmacopoeia. And what we found is that the community was growing, but not as fast as we liked. But then Naife, who I've been working with, began creating these discussions on LinkedIn and sharing them on LinkedIn with links to join the community, and immediately growth increased in that community. If you're a massive, mature community, this isn't the right approach for you. This isn't worth your time. But if you're trying to get a community off the ground, this is actually a very clever way to attract traffic. It's a very clever way to engage people. And it's so different from the typical advertising spam that's out there today. It engages precisely the kind of people that you want to have engaged by a discussion and an activity that's going to get them to join and visit that community. Lesson 3, maybe not relevant for everyone here, but consider a federated search tool, especially if you're doing a customer support community. It's really useful to have a search tool. When people search anywhere in your support site, discussions from the community can appear. Search Unify is one option, convey is another option. But what it means is that you're driving a lot more people to the community. There's a lot more people that are visiting that community in the first place. And again, not relevant for every single community that's out there, not every platform that's out there. But if you're able to do this, I would consider it. It's a very powerful way of getting all of your support content in one place, and it really improves the support experience. And it means that community often can fill the gap that is left behind by the other channels. Lesson 4, get the positioning and the communication right. What we've found over the years, and what I've been talking about a lot the last couple of months, is to properly position the community. Because too many communities today are really poorly positioned. The way we imagine it is like this hotel experience where we walk into the hotel and we're greeting our members, and we think that we're rolling out the red carpet. And it's never really like that. How members really think of our community is one of many places they could go at any one time. It's more like being in a shopping mall. And there's so many different places that people could visit. And the challenge is, why would people visit your community? What is the unique benefit or the unique value of someone to visit your community? And positioning here is critical. And getting that positioning right and communicating it the right way is absolutely critical here. Very often when people visit a community, when we look at a matrix like this, we find that if people just want information that's convenient and from a trusted source, they might go to documentation or shared articles by the organization if they trust you. If you want information that's convenient and is a shared experience, then social media might be the best option. There are people on these channels every single day, they use them all the time. It's the best option. If people want information from a trusted source that's personalized to them, then they might want an internal or external expert. They might reach out to someone specific. It's not convenient, but that's where they're likely to go. And if they want information that's personalized and is a shared experience, then it might be more asking colleagues by email or people that they know or friends or contacts in that space. And the challenge is, where does community fit into this? Where does community fit into a matrix like this? And what happens too often is community gets squeezed down into some box where it competes against something else. And far too often, the community is competing against either very difficult competition from the organization itself, or it's competing against a rival from another organization or another community. And that is detrimental to the community's growth and engagement. And we've found with a lot of organizations that if you can successfully reposition a community in the mind of your audience and how they really think of your community, that can be an absolutely huge win. So a typical example might be this. Again, we're using customer support examples here because that is a lot of the brand communities out there today, but you can adapt the axis to anything that makes sense to you. So the question is, if you want trustworthy answers that are personalized to you, as most people in a support environment do, why would you use a community when customer support does both options better? Customer support is probably more trustworthy and it's more personalized to you. So why would you use a community? It doesn't make sense to communicate your community along these kinds of axes. But what if you change this? What if you change the strategy here somewhat? What if you put convenience here? So now we can't, or typically customer support isn't more convenient than asking in the community. You might have to wait a long time. You might be put on a hold. It's an effort to try and pick up the phone. People don't like doing it. But now this might be the channels or the promotional aspect that you want to be signaling about your community. It might not be the most trustworthy place, but you might want to say to people that are visiting you for support, go to our community first. It's the most convenient way to get support, and then position customer support after that. So nothing beats the communities on both axes here. And really the perfect positioning is something like this, where there's a big gap between the community and any other possible competitor here. If we get this right, then there's a huge opportunity to change how people think about the community and really maximize the level of engagement. And it's okay to have competitors, just as long as competitors that you can compete against. You shouldn't be finding yourself competing against Facebook or Instagram. That means you have a positioning issue. And this works for really small communities as well. We've worked with a couple of communities for scientists over the last few years. And recently we brought into a community of scientists, a very niche kind of community, not US pharmacopoeia from earlier. And what we found is that the community, to get the positioning right, we found that what people really cared about was how friendly the environment was and how exclusive it was. Sure, people can get more trustworthy answers from more people at other places, other channels. Academic journals have great information. Existing mailing lists had a lot of information and were kind of exclusive. And there's a big scientific community already. But when we interview members, when we really dove deep to find out what they wanted, we found they wanted a friendly environment that was exclusive as well. And then we can find the unique positioning of the community. And that's when it begins to thrive. That's when it begins to hit that spot on the curve where it begins to really increase in the level of engagement. So we want to be learning how to powerfully communicating the positioning as well here. For example, we usually want a superlative. So not just the community for engineers to exchange ideas, but what is it about community that makes this community worth visiting? If people only remember one thing, what is the thing that they remember? Time and time again with clients, I find that they're so verbose in the messaging and what they're trying to say about the community. They're trying to include every benefit. They assume that people are going to read paragraphs of text, and they simply don't. What we want to do is chisel it down to the really core message. If people only remember one thing about the community, what is that one thing going to be? And so one example might be the most exclusive place for engineers to exchange ideas. If you're attracted to exclusivity, this is going to work for you. Or it might be discuss the most cutting edge developments in engineering with top experts. Again, most cutting edge is going to excite a different kind of audience. Or it might be the quickest way for customers to get help with their product problems. Again, speed is what you're communicating here. Or it might be where beginners can ask questions and get the friendliest responses. If you've been battered by getting really what's the word, angry messages on Stack Overflow or other channels that are a little bit hostile to beginners, then finding another place can really work for you. It might be discover the most popular beauty tips shared by people of color. Again, you can be, it's the most popular. You want to know what is the most popular and happening right now. And this goes on and on. The most convenient way for teachers to find templates. This is a real example of what we did. And it isn't just about your positioning. It changes everything you do in that community. It changes the entire strategy of your community as well. So it might be things like the most trustworthy, it might be speed, it might be convenience, it might be friendliest, but all this leads into a completely different community experience in terms of if it's most trustworthy, then how do you back that up? You don't just want to say what you want to be, you actually have to live it. And that might be moderating and checking every answer. It might be approving the people that join. It might be rewarding the top experts to get them involved. It might be removing poor quality contributions and running a regular audit and making sure information is still up to date. If it's speed, then you're focusing on reward systems that reward speed and escalation systems. So if the question is not answered quickly, then it gets escalated to the right person. If it's convenience, it usually means some level of integration with what people are doing at the moment, making it easier to use the platform. If it's friendliness, then you might be looking at more off-topic discussions and a powerful sense of community and those kinds of techniques. But hopefully we get the point. It's really, really important with your community, because whether you think it or not, there is competition. And the competition could just be that people do anything else with their day. Watch YouTube, watch reality shows, whatever else they might be doing. So there is competition. And why are people going to volunteer their spare time to engage in your community? And the positioning is really critical here. Let me give you another client example from the beginning of the year. The client originally had a message along this lines, which is the community is an exclusive group dedicated to empowering leaders by sharing world-class expertise, exchanging insights, and revamping industry best practices. What do you think about this message? Take maybe 30 seconds and put your answer in the chat. What strikes you about this message? So Jan says boring and stiff, Claire says too long, too wordy, Kay says wordy, too vague, generic. Yeah, I mean, no one's going to remember this. It doesn't stand out in their mind. It's not something that people are going to recall the moment after they've read it. If I went to like another 5 slides, none of you are going to remember what was on this slide, because it's full of cliches, it's just boring, it's generic, and it's trying to appeal to everyone. We changed this to this: a private place to solve your toughest problems. What do you think of this? Are you more likely to remember this? Is this more likely to be something that like, oh, I understand why I'm going to use this community at any particular time? And this is what we mean. Often people come up with these so verbose messages to explain what their community is, but you have to position your community the right way. Let me give you an example of Airbnb. If any of you are from Airbnb, I apologize, but I really hope you change this, to be honest. Look at the top message there. Welcome to a global community of hosts like you. Share knowledge, get inspired, and meet other hosts who are creating a world where anyone can belong. Sign in with your Airbnb account to be involved and visit this guide to get started. What do you think of this? Again, take maybe 20 seconds to put your answer in chat. What do you think of this? Do you think it's good or bad? It's not special. Rishi says it's specific, it's corporate. Some people think it's motivating. Looks inviting and organizing on the surface. Nice idea, too wordy. So let me ask you a question. How many of you have ever been an Airbnb host? Okay. And how many of you have participated in this community here? Exactly. So that's my point. I mean, and this isn't to dump you at all. It's because it's a message that sounds good. It sounds like it should work. But if you're an Airbnb host, my experience, and I used to be an Airbnb host, is that honestly, I wasn't really that interested in meeting other hosts like me. That wasn't the benefit that I wanted. But I guarantee you, if they positioned this differently, if they communicated this messaging as boost your host rating, ratings don't increase by chance, discover the easiest tips to boost your rating from top hosts, I'm betting a lot more hosts, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm betting a lot more hosts would engage in that community. I'm betting a lot more hosts would visit and engage in that community. And so I think you have to really think about what is the core benefit for people to visit and engage in that community. And often it isn't what people think it should be. So part 2, how do we reduce churn? And I know there's questions in the chat. I can't tackle all of them, but I'm going to do my best. So part 2, how do we reduce churn? What we found is that when we look at how many posts people are making in a community, the graph is always the same. Almost no matter what community we look at, the graph is always the same, which is the majority of active members contribute just 1 post in a brand community. This varies a little bit for some groups. Reddit, it seems to be a bit different, but any brand community and the majority of non-Reddit communities seem to have this kind of curve. And which also means that 75 to 90% of registered members don't participate at all, When we looked at the data, we scraped all the data we could to collect this. We found that most registered members don't participate. They sign up to participate, but they don't actually participate. And you have to wonder, why is that? What it means is that a small shift in the median here to this level will double the number of contributions in most communities. And the way to do that is to build a better member journey. And there's reasons why people do and don't participate in a community at the moment. And if you've been following my work for a while, you know I've shared this a lot, but I'll quickly go through it here, which is first, people have to be aware the community exists. They have to see the value, the positioning is where it comes in here. They have to trust the community to deliver on that value. And then if they're members of competitor groups, there could be reasons why they don't join. But the reasons why people join and initially participate are different from why people stay engaged in the community. And very often we don't get this right. When people first visit a community, they don't want a place, if I'm honest, they don't want a place where they can feel like they belong. It's not the immediate experience they want. What they usually need is immediate gratification. They have to know the community has value to them. And that usually means solving a problem they know they have, or improving their skills or their knowledge in some way. You can consider pursuing a passion here, but I found this to be the least successful one. So I would recommend thinking about, when people visit your community for the first time, what is the problem you're going to help them solve? Or what are the immediate skills or knowledge that they can acquire that they can immediately use? Like, that feedback loop has to be really quick so they immediately get value from that community. And that's going to drive them participating. And over time, the more they feel competent within that environment, the more they feel autonomous within that environment and connected to others, that's what's going to keep them engaged over the long term. But the challenge isn't that competence, autonomy, relatedness part. It's getting someone from making one contribution to making two, or making zero contributions to making one. If you change the height of that curve, you're going to have a big impact upon the level of engagement indefinitely. And so most of the time, we haven't really figured out, when people visit our community, what is the immediate problem they solve, or the immediate skill or knowledge that they acquire that they can use. If you get that right, you immediately have a lot more people engaging. Lesson 5 is that members want information. And when we're talking about communicating your positioning, the other part of this is making sure that you're communicating the right thing. Very often, because community evokes a certain communal nature, and there's a lot of connotations with that word, we think about things like friendship, belonging. But every single survey I've done of every single community I've worked with has said the number one reason for participating is information exchange. And if you don't believe my research, there's a lot of independent researchers out there as well, but people want information. Other things are useful, and that plays a bigger part over time perhaps, but information exchange is by far the most important thing. And so the challenge is, what is the information that people want? And very often we don't communicate this the right way. It's not specific or immediate enough. So we might have a community that says, hey, attract more clients, but a better way of doing this might be download these proposal templates right now. We might be connected with the top experts, but a better way of doing this would be, hey, here are 5 people you can ask about the 5 most common problems that people face. Again, it's a more immediate gratification. Instead of solve your problem, a better approach might be ask us about this, this, and this issue. So you're telling people the kind of problems that your experts want to solve. Instead of telling a newcomer to join an upcoming webinar, it might be a better way of communicating that, or how to get buy-in for your strategy, etc. So there's a very specific way that you can communicate almost any message to make it more impactful over time. And lesson 6 is to gradually expand the value of a community over time. When we think about the value of a community, we often begin here. Not always, but with a brand community, and I'm assuming most people here are brand communities, we usually begin with a product Q&A discussion. People come, they ask questions, they get help, and they leave. And almost no matter what you do, it's almost impossible with a community set up like this to get people to come back and visit more often, because they need another problem they need to solve. But if you change the very nature of that community, if you change entirely what that community is about, if you make it more about exploration, where there's product blogs and tutorials and webinars and things that people can immediately learn, and be careful here that it's not overwhelming, then people have a reason to come back again. Maybe you expand the other way, where you're not just dealing with the product issues that people have, maybe you have career questions here. You're expanding the value of that community over their careers. So there's a career Q&A discussion, because people that are struggling with a product issue often are in similar careers, and maybe they can share advice. And then maybe you want to expand to say ideation and super user pro programs. Maybe you want to have career-related blogs. Maybe you want to have an off-topic discussion, and you can gradually expand over time. And you don't necessarily even need to begin here. You can begin almost any way you want. I know communities that are launched from a blog or a tutorial or webinar site. I know communities that have originally begun with local user groups. I know communities that have begun with career-related blogs and webinars and gone either direction there. I even know like a community, the Wistia community, which began with behind-the-scenes content of the brand. And so there's so many options that you can go with here. So just decide which makes sense of your audience. And if you want to increase engagement, you usually have to expand the value of the community over time and select whichever combination makes sense to you. And again, this directly changes the activities you initiate in that community. So if we go with a very simple example, in a support community, if it's just about asking questions and getting answers, a discussion might be, how can I fix my widget issue in the community? Content might be the ultimate guide to that widget. A challenge might be share your best tips for fixing that issue. An activity might be joining a live discussion. If it's exploration, then it might be, what are some hidden tips for doing something with that widget? Or a content piece about the top 10 ways to use that. Or it might be a challenge, sharing your best projects using that widget, and etc. So that influence, then you can give people influence over that environment. Again, it changes the emotional value that people have to the community. If it's belonging, then it's a completely different kind of discussions and content and activities you're creating. Does this make sense? Is everyone still with me here? Awesome. I know it's a lot of information quite quickly, but I'm really keen to share some of the best lessons I've learned here. So lesson 7, developing a member journey. I really think it's a good idea to use a tool like Smaply or Mural or whatever works for you and really visualize step by step that entire member experience. I like Smaply because it lets you put in the emotional state as well, but honestly, you can do it with a whole variety of tools, Mural, Mirror, a whole variety of different tools. And really think about it step by step from when someone first becomes aware the community exists to what's going to interest them, what is the reason that they're going to join, the registration, confirmation. Really think about it from the member's perspective and even sit with them if you want. You can use Hotjar to measure the states, or, and this is what we've begun doing recently, it's been really effective, which is to have a Zoom call with some of your members and go through the process with them and get live feedback from them as they're going through it. You might be amazed at how useful this is. And you might be amazed also how they feel about the kind of emails that you're sending out. Do they find it cliche? Did they actually read the entire content? If you ask people the next day after they received an email from you what was on it and they don't remember, that email was far too long. So you can go through step by step here and really optimize every part of the journey. And even designing different steps for what people like to see in the community. So you might have a series email, what people get if they're just a learner, what they get if they're first-time contributor. And you can design a whole flowchart that works for that. Some tools offer different kind of things. We've been looking at this for one of my clients at the moment, CyberArk. But it's possible to build these kind of things into different kinds of communities. Tableau has a great example, where when you join, you get taken through this journey, where you complete your profile, you highlight what you're interested in, what groups you like, what notifications you like, and it guides you along that journey as well. So really dive deep into this. Begin with just one journey to start with, but go through it with your members. Really have a Zoom call with them, and as they go through it, get live feedback on what they're doing, what they're clicking on. Have them share their screen. You will be absolutely amazed at how insightful this kind of research is. And then you can copy the template here if you like. You can find it on feverBee.com/buildyourcommunity. But you can really just develop your own as well. And what we typically find is that there is a journey people go through that begins with the discovery phase. It goes to the registration phase. Then it goes to that first contribution phase. Then there's that newcomer phase where you want them to consume the best content, maybe join a newcomer group, maybe have a progression check, following the top members. And then you want them to turn into a regular super user. This is actually the journey we found most successful with most clients at this point. Really, it means beginning with that discovery, really looking at registration, how we can improve that, looking at the first contribution, Then in the newcomer stage, again, that immediate gratification of consuming the best information, most useful thing to them, joining a mentoring group of some sort, having a progression check. That's usually a direct message from a member, or some survey that they complete or benchmarking form, and then following the top members. And then gradually you get them to evolve beyond that. And it's a journey that you continually measure and update and tweak as you progress as well. I know it's been an absolutely huge amount of information, but hopefully it all made sense. I'll send through the slides so you can all go through it. I know we're a little short on time, so Ari, if you want to jump in here, feel free. And if you want any more information about me, please go to FeverBee.com or email me, richard@FeverBee.com. Thank you so much, everyone. And I'm around for like 12 minutes for questions.
Amazing. Richard, thank you so much. That was absolutely awesome. I really love the hotel analogy in the shopping mall and the example you used of Airbnb. Those really resonated with me. So we got a bunch of questions. The first one's like pretty easy from Christine K. She asked if you could just quickly go back and show the slide that was in maybe your first 10 or 15 slides, the one that you asked everybody to take a screenshot of.
Yeah, give me a second. I think it was this one.
All right. Get those screenshots ready.
And I think that we'll be sending through the slides after this, right?
Absolutely. And yeah, we will be sharing the slides. Thank you for bringing that up. All right. The next question was from Stephen L. He said, what do you mean about not competing against Facebook? One of the questions we get asked a lot is why don't we put effort into growing our Facebook group rather than on a brand new community using a platform such as Tribe that has bigger hurdles in terms of engagement and discoverability?
So what I mean by that is that, I'm not knocking Facebook groups. They have uses, but they have limitations as well that I'm not going to go into too deep here because I think they're quite obvious for this point. I think it's a bad idea when you're competing on the same turf as a competitor. So the reason why a lot of hosted communities struggle, when they do struggle, is they're competing against social media. And the barrier to join a community can be really high. People have to fill in a registration form, they might have to remember their password, they've got to figure out how this particular experience needs and create a post. So it's not always the most convenient place to go. So it's very hard to compete on convenience. And so you have to think, what can you offer that Facebook can't? What is the experience that only a hosted community can offer? And usually here you might think about exclusivity, privacy in some form that maybe a Facebook group can't offer. Maybe you want to think about an easy way to share and document information. Maybe you want to think about people going to arrive by search, and as that grows, there's a factor on this. I think it's really important, if I go back to the positioning slides here, it's really important to find a unique niche, and you shouldn't be competing against yourself or your organization that you work with. You shouldn't be competing against customer support or other channels. But what's to stop a member of your audience starting a Facebook group, inviting everyone in that community to join? That's the question you have to answer. And I don't have the answer to that, but it's probably going to be the direct access to you in some form. That means the organization. It's probably going to be that it's easier to browse for information in the community than it is a Facebook group. So it's about what does only your community offer, and is that value big enough that it overcomes the inconvenience of going to any hosted community platform and engaging that. So again, use Facebook if you don't have an answer to that question, but I feel like you should have an answer to that question.
Awesome. The next question is from John Z or John Z, depending on where you are. Can you share any tactics to get your internal experts motivated to share their expertise with community members?
I spent ages working on this at the World Bank many years ago, having the subject matter experts trying to engage. It's hit and miss. There's nothing that works for everyone. And I think when this question comes up is that people are looking for a tactic that will apply and you can use it, and suddenly all these experts are going to be engaged. What I found, the only thing for me that consistently works is the relationship you have with the experts. Do they want to help you? Do they like you? Do they trust you? Is there value for them in engaging that community? And you have to think about an internal expert, like what is their motivation? And very often that is being seen as the expert. So if you have a specific place in the community that is the designated experts or the verified experts, that can help. But the relationship is the most critical thing. Another thing to think about is who do they want to impress? And the challenge that's come up again before at the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and other clients I've worked with is that the top experts only want to impress the other experts. But a lot of the questions in a community are more at the beginner level, the intermediate level. And so very often you need a private group just for top experts to engage with one another if you want them in your platform. So you had to think about what is the value proposition you're offering them. Like if you're an expert, where are you going to go and engage and participate? And I don't know the answer to that, but it's not a tactic, it's a strategy. And I think you have to figure out, is it a strategy that's based upon, hey, we're going to help you build your expertise here? Or is it a strategy that, oh, I'm going to build relationships with the top experts so they want to help? Or is it a strategy of, oh, I'm going to build a private place where they can engage with the top experts just like them? One of those three is probably the answer.
Awesome. So the next question was from Louise B. She said, search re-indexing is a great recommendation for external search engine traffic. What do you recommend from the community native search perspective to improve relevancy of search results? Do you recommend archiving within community regularly to make native search more relevant? Or do you recommend upgrading community native search to providers like Coveo or Coveo?
Yeah, so it depends on your budget and your level and where you're at today. If you're a big organization, then Coveo can be a good answer. But I think the price for that begins at around 40 grand a year. I might be wrong about that, but I think it's around that level. And so it's an expensive solution. So only if you're a mature community with a huge amount of information. Generally, it's a case of archiving what you have is usually the better option, or de-indexing some results from internal search. But it's tricky because it depends a lot upon what platform and where you're at as well.
Amazing. This is from Dan. What are some proven techniques to bring back members who used to be regular or active members?
It's very difficult to do. And that's why I kind of don't spend a lot of time talking about it, because almost all of that time is better spent focusing upon the members that are new and don't have an existing experience of that community, because then you can shape that experience from scratch. So that wouldn't be my target audience. People that are gone typically, not always, but typically stay gone. The exceptions to that are employee communities, where you definitely want to engage them in that sense. And maybe there's a couple of other kinds of groups as well. It's a lot like digging for the last remnants of oil after the well has been fully tapped. I mean, you might get around to it, but there's a lot of fresher fields elsewhere for new areas of engagement. The only thing I think really works here is that A, they hear about the community again from elsewhere, and that changes their impression of it. Or B, you do some sort of big relaunch that repositions the community in their minds. But there's no tactics, there's no emails. I've really not found much success here as well. Maybe other people have, but honestly, I haven't seen anyone achieve this.
So if I were to gather the things that might work, it's word of mouth and a very large reset.
Well,
awesome.
the thing that works is improving the community. So it's a reason for them that they hear about it and then they come back. It's an afterthought. I wouldn't prioritize it at all.
Awesome. So the next question was from submitted anonymously, but it's highly relevant, especially to a lot of tribe customers. So how significant is the barrier for private communities, those that are password protected, they require SSO to join, and they're not visible in search? What's the best strategy to overcome this type of challenge?
I'm not 100% sure what the goal of that question is. How significant is a barrier for private communities? So is the question how to get members to join and participate, or is the question how to get rid of the barrier, like the password itself? I'm not sure, but I'm going to assume it's how do you get a community engaged and active when it's passworded and private and shielded. The only reason to have a private community really is if you combine it with exclusivity. There isn't usually a good reason for community to be private if it's not exclusive as well. So I would focus on the exclusivity part and own it. Like if you are exclusive, highlight the kind of members you have, highlight the kind of engagement you have, highlight the kind of discussions that people are having. So yeah, I think you've really got to go down the exclusivity route, and also combine it with an invitation referral program as well. So maybe every member has one invitation a month they can give to a friend or a colleague, and it expires after that month, or one invitation a year, or something along that can work.
Awesome. Well, Richard, I am looking at the time. We're going to wrap up. I'm just going to take over and quickly share my screen again here. Let's see, there we go. So, Richard, thank you so much again for sharing all the valuable insights. You've empowered hundreds more with your powerful and proven techniques on community building. So it's very much appreciated. There were a number of questions about sharing the slides, sharing the recording. Yes, we're going to be sharing all the assets that we have from this webinar. So I just want to make sure that's clear. Just a reminder about our giveaway of Richard's book. So if you want to join Campfire and reply to our posts about the webinar and share your learning, either in Tribe's Campfire community in our community success space, or by taking to Twitter and sharing your learning by mentioning Rich Millington or Tribe platform. Remember, that's 140 characters or less, so you got to be concise. And then feedback. So again, this is our very first webinar. So we really want to make sure that we get as many people as possible who are submitting feedback to us. Be, as I said, as constructively ruthless as you can possibly be. Richard, thank you so much to everybody that spent the time today. We appreciate you joining us. I think this was a great success. Thanks for getting us set up on the right foot. We appreciate it.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.